He told me to take the back roads that morning. Said there was a wreck on the main highway. Said it twice, real casual. Over coffee, like he was trying to sound helpful. I was halfway to work when I hit that slope by Carter's Mill. No brakes, just air. My foot pressed straight to the floor and met nothing but dead silence. I didn't scream, didn't have time. All I remember was the trees rushing past my window, like I was flying sideways. I swerved into a ditch so hard the front axle cracked like a bone, but the car stopped just short of the water. Airbag bruised my chest, glass in my elbow, but I was alive. And when I looked up, there was his sister, Renetta, running barefoot across the gravel from her porch, screaming my name like her life depended on it. That's when I knew. Something was off. She wasn't surprised. She was terrified. My name is Marcia Dean Whitaker. I'm 47 years old, born and raised in Macon, Georgia, where the air smells like honeysuckle and motor oil, and folks still hang their laundry out on the line just to catch the afternoon breeze, where people wave even if they don't like you, and gossip travels faster than the freight trains that cut through downtown every night. And this is the story of how I learned that silence can be louder than revenge. Me and Charles been married 16 years, and for a long time I thought we were good. Not perfect, but solid. We had a house off Birchfield Lane, yellow vinyl siding, red shutters, fake brick trim out front. You could hear the wind whistle through the loose gutters when it rained. The front porch light flickered sometimes, but it made the place feel alive, like an old friend that still breathed. We didn't have much, but it was ours. I used to keep a rosemary bush by the mailbox. Said it kept bad spirits away. Mama told me that. I watered it every morning before work. I worked at the county clerk's office. Beige walls, buzzing lights, stacks of manila folders that smelled like dust and old secrets. Most days, I stamped deeds and processed court filings while sipping coffee from a chipped mug that said Best Auntie in Georgia. Charles worked construction, mostly drywall and flooring jobs, subcontracting when he could, always promising that one big project that'd change everything. He had a charm about him, that kind of slow, southern talk that made people trust him even when they shouldn't. At home, I cooked. He fixed things. That was the rhythm of our marriage. Some evenings, I'd stop by Ms. Lila's bakery downtown for peach cobbler, the good kind, the crust buttery and the filling thick like syrup. Charles would eat half straight out the pan with a spoon, no plate, just standing by the counter in his work boots. He'd look up at me with that grin and say, "Girl, you gon' spoil me." And I'd laugh, like love was something you could measure in dessert. But looking back now, there were cracks in the foundation long before the brakes gave out. I remember the first time he embarrassed me in public. It was at his cousin Jameer's 4th of July cookout. Hot day, flies circling the ribs, somebody blasting Frankie Beverly from a speaker that kept skipping. I made him a plate, ribs, potato salad, cornbread, the usual. He took one look and said loud enough for everybody to hear, "Why would you give me this burnt mess? You know I don't eat no damn crust." The laughter around the table just stopped. You could hear the ice clinking in somebody's glass. I smiled, played it off, said, "Guess I like my food a little crispy." But inside, something cracked. Renetta, his sister, saw it too. Later that night, she sat beside me on the porch while the fireworks popped over the trees. She handed me a paper plate with a slice of pound cake and asked softly, "Girl, you good?" I laughed it off. Told her, "He just had too much Crown." She nodded slow like she didn't believe me but didn't want to push. That was 3 summers ago. Back when I still thought small things didn't mean much. Over time, his moods changed, got darker. He'd disappear on weekends, say he was working a site in Warner Robins, came home smelling like menthols and women's lotion. One Sunday night, I found a pair of gold hoop earrings in the back seat of his truck. He said they were Renetta's, claimed he'd given her a ride to church and she dropped them. Problem was, Renetta don't even wear gold, never has. Another time, I checked our joint account online, saw $1,100 gone, said it was for lumber. I asked for the receipts. He said, "You think I gotta prove everything to you now?" And walked out the door. I should have left then. I know that. But after you've built a life with somebody, even a broken one, leaving starts to feel like tearing your own skin off. And I'd already done that once before. So I stayed, cooked dinner, paid bills, smiled at church, played the part of a woman who wasn't drowning. Then the phone calls started. Private numbers, breathing, hang-ups. One night I answered, and somebody whispered, "You should watch your back." I froze. Voice sounded female, young, shaky. Before I could say anything, the line went dead. I blocked the number, told myself it was some prank, didn't tell a soul, not even my sister. But a few days later, after service at Mount Olive Baptist, Renetta pulled me behind the fellowship hall. Her hands were trembling. She looked pale, eyes darting around like she didn't want anyone to see us. She said, "Marcia, you got anyone else drive your car lately?" I frowned. "No, just me." Her lips quivered. She bit her thumbnail, a habit she had since childhood. Then she said, real quiet, "Don't take that car nowhere till you get it looked at." I laughed, thought she was being dramatic, said, "Girl, it's fine. Charles just changed the oil last week." She shook her head. "Please, just promise me." There was something in her eyes that chilled me. Fear, guilt, something heavy. That was 2 days before I went into that ditch. After the crash, everything felt slow, like the world was underwater. I remember the sound of gravel popping under the sheriff's boots as he walked around my car, scratching his head. Said maybe the brake line rusted out. Called it a miracle. I wasn't hurt worse. Told me to be more careful next time. He didn't take notes. Didn't even look close. Just shrugged like it was nothing. I sat there on the ambulance bumper, blanket over my shoulders, heart still racing, trying to make sense of it all. Then I saw Renetta, crying barefoot, still wearing her house robe. She knelt down, grabbed my hand, and whispered, "He didn't mean to kill you, Marcia. He just wanted to scare you." I stared at her like she'd lost her mind, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. She just kept talking, voice shaking. She told me Charles had been running his mouth, saying I was trying to trap him, that I was getting in the way of business, that he had somebody waiting in Columbus if things didn't work out. Then she said she saw him under my car one night. He thought she was asleep, but she watched him drain the brake fluid, throw the cap in the trash, and walk away like he'd just taken out the garbage. She said she wanted to tell me sooner, but she was scared of him, scared of what he might do if he knew she knew. I didn't cry, didn't yell, didn't even move. I just stared at the ceiling of that hospital room while the monitor beeped slow and steady, because in that moment, I knew 2 things for sure. My husband had tried to kill me, and his own sister loved me enough to tell the truth. The next morning, I filed a police report, showed them the car, showed them the fluid leak, told them everything Renetta said. They called it hearsay, said it was family drama, said without hard proof there was nothing they could do. I walked out of that station with a manila folder in my hand and a new kind of silence sitting heavy in my chest. I didn't go home that night. I drove to my sister's place on the south side and slept on her couch with the lights on. Didn't answer Charles's calls. Didn't tell him what I knew, just stayed quiet. Because sometimes silence ain't weakness, it's strategy. And if silence had saved my life once, it could save it again. So I went still, like a pond before a storm. Didn't make a ripple. Didn't show a hint of fear. Because the thing about men like Charles, they can't stand silence. They need noise, need reaction to feel alive. And I was done feeding him life. The night I came home from the hospital, Charles was sitting on the porch like nothing had happened. Legs stretched out, beer bottle in hand, phone glowing in his palm. The blue light flickered across his face, catching that faint smirk he wore when he thought he was untouchable. Didn't even look up when I pulled into the driveway in Renetta's old sedan. "Thought you was dead," he said, still scrolling. His voice was flat, like he was testing how much he could get away with. I smiled, cold, small, said, "Not today." He laughed, sharp, forced, just a little too long, but I saw it. That tiny twitch in his jaw, the one he got when he was trying to swallow his nerves. I parked, turned off the ignition, and just sat there a moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. The air outside smelled like cut grass and rain-soaked dirt. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Everything looked the same. Porch light humming, wind chimes tapping soft against the gutter. But nothing felt the same. When I finally stepped out, the gravel crunched under my shoes. I could feel his eyes on me now, even if he pretended to scroll. I moved slow that evening, walked inside like nothing was broken, like I hadn't just come back from almost dying. The house smelled faintly of pine sol and stale beer, the kind of smell that sticks to your clothes even after you leave. I hung my jacket, set my purse down, and moved through the kitchen. The clock above the stove ticked too loud. I cooked dinner anyway. Smothered chicken, rice, and black-eyed peas. The smell of onions sizzling in butter filled the air, mixing with the faint scent of old grease and cigarette smoke from the porch. It was muscle memory more than care. The skillet hissed, the rice pot bubbled, and I moved through every step like it was a prayer I'd said too many times. When it was done, I set his plate at the table like I always did. Fork on the right. Napkin folded neat. He didn't touch it, said he wasn't hungry, didn't even look up. So I washed the dishes by hand, not because we didn't have a dishwasher, but because I liked the rhythm. Warm water, soapy silence, a kind of peace in the motion, back and forth, rinse and stack like counting breaths. And while I scrubbed that old cast iron skillet, I started planning. Not revenge, not yet, just survival. When somebody tries to end you and fails, they don't get a second warning. You don't yell, you don't fight, you don't argue, you just prepare. That night, after he went to bed, I started going through the house one drawer at a time. Not to pack, not yet. I was looking. For what? I didn't even know at first. Maybe proof? Maybe peace. I checked under the sink, behind photo frames, inside the couch cushions. Every space in that house carried his fingerprints, the kind of invisible marks that make a place feel smaller. When I got to the hall closet, I moved the old towels, the spare light bulbs, and the plastic bin of winter scarves. That's when I saw it. An envelope wedged behind the water heater, dusty, folded, hidden. Inside were bank slips I didn't recognize, wiring instructions, a prepaid flip phone. The papers smelled faintly like gasoline and mold. It looked like he'd been moving money, maybe for months, maybe longer. I sat down on the floor, my pulse thudding in my ears, took out my old Samsung phone, the one with the cracked corner, snapped photos of everything. No flash, no cloud backup, just memory card storage, evidence that couldn't vanish with a password. I didn't sleep that night, just sat on the edge of the bed, listening to his breathing, slow, heavy, steady, and thought about how close I'd come to never hearing anything again. The next morning, I called out of work, told them I had a family emergency. They didn't ask. They knew Charles. Folks in small towns always know, even when they pretend they don't. I spent the next few days in silence. No TV, no calls, just moving through the house, careful and slow, like walking through someone else's crime scene. On Wednesday, Renetta showed up with groceries, canned soup, fresh fruit, a carton of eggs. She stood on the porch like she wasn't sure if she should come in. Her eyes darted to the driveway, then to me. "He's getting paranoid," she whispered. "Be careful." Her voice cracked when she said it. I nodded, gave her a small smile, and squeezed her hand. Didn't say a word. That night, I slept with a hammer under my pillow and a Bible on the nightstand. It wasn't faith I was leaning on. It was something older than that. A kind of quiet defiance that women learn after being dismissed too many times. Charles didn't touch me that week. Didn't talk much, either. He just watched. The way his eyes followed me felt different now. He wasn't studying me like a husband. He was studying me like a threat, like a man who'd set a trap and couldn't figure out why it hadn't sprung. 2 weeks later, he got bold again. I came home from church one Sunday, humming a hymn under my breath, still wearing my Sunday dress. When I walked into our bedroom, I froze. My clothes were everywhere. Drawers dumped out, shoes thrown against the wall, underwear scattered like trash. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. His voice was low but sharp. "You hiding something?" I set my purse down slow, smiled soft. "Only my peace." That line hit him like a slap. He stood up too fast, the bed creaking under the sudden weight shift, knocked over the lamp with his elbow. "You think you smart, huh?" he barked. "Think you can play me?" The air between us went cold. Even the ticking clock seemed to hold its breath. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. Just said, calm as rain, "I don't play with fire, Charles. I wait till it burns out." He stared at me for a long moment, eyes wild, nostrils flaring, then grabbed his keys and stormed out. The sound of his truck engine growling down the street felt like relief. He didn't come back till morning. That was the week I went to see Ms. Tilda, an old notary who used to work down at the courthouse before arthritis took her fingers. Her little brick duplex sat behind the Piggly Wiggly on Maple Street. You could smell magnolia trees and fried catfish from the kitchen next door. I brought her a jug of sweet tea and a folder of papers: power of attorney, transfer titles, backup deed for the land Mama left me in Twiggs County. Her eyes scanned the papers, slow. She didn't ask questions, just said, "Baby, you doing the right thing?" Her voice shook a little, like she knew what kind of right thing I meant. That same day, I stopped by the county office, removed Charles from my health insurance, changed my emergency contact, updated my passwords, one by one, email, bank, utilities. Bit by bit, I erased his footprint from my life. But silence makes a man like Charles dangerous. It eats at them, the way darkness eats at light. One night, I woke up to the sound of pacing, boots on hardwood, back and forth, back and forth. He was mumbling to himself, half words, half curses. Ungrateful, disloyal, think she better than me? The words bled through the thin wall like poison. Then the footsteps stopped. The door creaked open slow. He stood there in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light. His shadow stretched long across the floor. Didn't move, didn't speak, just watched me. My throat went dry, but I kept my eyes on him. "Go ahead, Charles," I said softly. "Say what you came to say." He didn't, just stared, then closed the door and walked away. That silence was worse than shouting. It meant calculation. It meant he was thinking again. After that night, I started sleeping at Renetta's 3 nights a week, told him she needed help painting. He didn't argue, didn't even pretend to care. I think part of him wanted me gone, so he could tell people I left on my own. But I wasn't gone yet. I was documenting, recording, building my quiet case. I went through his old phone bills, wrote down unfamiliar numbers, matched dates with withdrawals from the bank slips I'd photographed, and when I finally found the text messages between him and some woman named Jada, I didn't cry, didn't scream, just forwarded them to my old email, subject line, insurance, because one day they'd be proof. A few nights later, Renetta and I sat in her kitchen drinking sweet tea out of mason jars. The light buzzed soft overhead. Outside, the cicadas sang like a warning. She asked, "You gon' leave or make him pay?" I watched the steam rise from my mug, took a slow sip, said, "Why not both?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. We both knew what that meant. See, folks like Charles don't understand closure. They think control is the end game. But control fades. And once a woman gets quiet, it's already too late. He cut my brakes. He cut his own future. And now I was holding the scissors. The night I finally moved my name off the mortgage, I didn't even tell Renetta, didn't tell a soul, just put on my gray sweater, the one with the stretched out cuffs and a coffee stain near the wrist, and walked down to the county building after hours. The streets were empty, the air thick with the sound of crickets and the faint hum of a passing freight train somewhere beyond the river. The county building sat at the corner of Cherry and Fifth, its fluorescent hallway lights glowing pale against the night sky. Inside, the air smelled like lemon cleaner and old paper. I could hear the echo of my own footsteps bouncing off the tile. Miss Charlene, who I used to eat lunch with every Wednesday, was still working the late shift in records. Her gray hair was pinned up neat, her glasses low on her nose. She looked up when she saw me and gave that kind of smile that says, "I won't ask questions I already know the answer to." She didn't ask why, didn't press, just handed me the pen and said, "You ready?" I nodded once. The sound of my signature scraping across the page felt final, like closing a door softly behind me. Charles wouldn't know, not yet. He wouldn't see it until the next property tax bill came in the mail, and by then I'd be gone. Not vanished, but free. That week, I started sleeping in shifts, first from 9 to midnight, then again from 3 to 6. I kept a flashlight and a kitchen knife beside the bed, not because I was scared, because I wasn't stupid. Charles had stopped pretending. No more good morning, no more fake concern, no small talk about coffee or weather. He didn't ask how my shoulder was healing, didn't notice the limp that still made me favor my right side. He just looked at me like I was taking up too much oxygen, like I was the last wall between him and whatever new life he was building in secret. One evening, I found him outside by the shed. The motion light flicked on, throwing his shadow long across the yard. He was digging through a box. Old receipts, tools, a gas can half full. When he saw me watching, he straightened, smiled too easily. "Just looking for my socket wrench," he said. But I saw the rag in his hand, and that look, that cold, empty stare that always came before something got broken. I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, said, "You planning on fixing something or burning it down?" He paused, laughed too long, then brushed past me without a word. The smell of gasoline clung to his jacket as he went inside. I stood there in the dark, the crickets loud now, my heart louder. The wind caught the rag he'd dropped and blew it toward the ditch. That's when I knew I couldn't wait any longer. 2 days later, I called in a favor. Mr. Lawson, an old friend, from church, tall man with silver hair and a voice like gravel, used to work private security for the county fair. He didn't ask questions either, just showed up with his white van and strong arms, same as he had when he helped my mama move 20 years back. We packed quiet, only what mattered. My mama's photo albums wrapped in towels, the green folder with all the documents, my notebooks, every word I'd written since high school, and my grandmother's quilt still smelling faintly of cedar and lavender. We left the rest, the furniture, the television, the dishes we'd picked out together back when together still meant something. Because I wasn't running, I was repositioning. And there's a difference. Renetta let me stay in her guest room. Pale yellow walls, lace curtains that smelled like sun-dried sheets. She hugged me tight and said, "You don't owe him your body just because your name's on the lease." I laughed, tired but grateful. That night, she cooked cornbread and fried catfish, rubbed eucalyptus oil on my temples when the ache in my shoulder flared. And when I cried, real tears this time, not the kind you swallow, she held my hand and said, "You survived. That's enough for now." But surviving ain't where I planned to stop. That same night, when the house was quiet and the world felt still, I opened my laptop. The screen lit my face in a cold blue glow. I pulled up the burner email account I'd set up months ago, under a name close enough to mine that no one would notice. Then I started sending attachments, photos, screenshots, the break line, the hidden bank slips, the text messages, each one sent to 3 places. One to Camille, my old friend from Atlanta, sharp, steady, and loyal as they come. one to the Georgia Domestic Abuse Coalition, and one to the County Tax Fraud Division, because Charles hadn't just hurt me. He'd stolen from me, used my Social Security number, filed fake contracts, moved money under forged signatures. When I saw those forms with my name misspelled, Marcia instead of Marcia, I almost laughed. He'd gotten sloppy, and sloppy men get caught. The next morning, I drove downtown with my papers in a manila envelope, walked into the courthouse with my head high and my shoulders square. The clerk looked tired, like most folks in that building. I told her I needed to file a statement revoking all joint assets. She stamped it without a word. Then I slid another document across the counter. A restraining order, quiet one, under seal. Didn't serve it yet. Just had it ready. Preparation is its own kind of peace. When I left the courthouse, the afternoon sun hit me full in the face. The air smelled like hot asphalt and honeysuckle. I took it as a sign that I was walking the right direction. Back at Renetta's, I sat on her porch swing with a cup of peppermint tea and watched the street. The wood creaked softly beneath me. Children played down the block, laughter echoing like a language I used to speak. Around 7:12 p.m., my phone buzzed. Blocked number. I answered. Said nothing. He spoke first. Why is my account frozen? I waited a beat. Let the silence stretch. Then said, Ask the county. I'm not your secretary anymore. There was a long pause. Then the sound of him exhaling, sharp and angry. He hung up. 2 minutes later, he called again. I didn't pick up. The voicemail came through 30 seconds later. Started calm, ended in a roar. Threats, curses, and something animal at the end, like a man unraveling. I saved it, labeled it Exhibit A. That weekend, Renetta and I took a drive. Her car smelled like coconut air freshener and hope. We turned down Vine Street, past the laundromat and that old gas station where kids still sold mixtapes out the trunk. And there he was, Charles. Out front of a rundown apartment complex, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. Jada. Had to be her. He was grilling ribs on a rusty barbecue pit, smoke curling up into the evening sky, holding a red Solo cup, laughing like a man who'd never seen consequence. Renetta drove slow, eyes on the road, but I caught the reflection of his face in her rearview mirror. He looked free, unbothered. Like he thought I'd disappeared for good. We didn't stop, didn't honk, didn't need to, because I knew right then he thought I was done. But silence ain't surrender, it's strategy, and mine had only just begun. I went back to work part-time at the county office. Walking through those glass doors felt strange, like stepping into my old life wearing new skin. The ladies in the office welcomed me with open arms. Ms. Noreen brought banana pudding. Tammy gave me a pink notebook with "You got this" written in gold script across the cover. I smiled, thanked them, told them the truth, but only the edges of it. Just the smoke, not the fire, because if I said it all out loud, I might start shaking. And I needed stillness more than sympathy. Every day, I made one more move. Filed for a legal name change. Back to Whitaker, my daddy's name. Redirected my mail. Opened a new account at a credit union in Warner Robins. Signed it M.D. Whitaker. I wasn't just leaving, I was shedding. Like a snake crawling out of its own skin, raw but alive. Like a storm moving out after tearing down every rotten thing in its path. Then the letter came. Plain white envelope. Typed. No return address. No name. Just one line. He's planning to leave the state. Tomorrow. Renetta found it first, slipped through the mail slot that afternoon. She read it twice, lips pressed tight, then handed it to me. The air between us went heavy. No words, no questions. That night, I didn't sleep. Just paced the floor in the silver light of the moon, whispering scripture under my breath. Psalm 27, I said too. The walls, the night, and myself. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? My voice shook at first, then steadied. because I knew what I had to do, and I knew it had to be quiet, precise, unmistakable. If he thought he could run, he didn't know who he was married to. The morning I went to the sheriff's office, the air was already thick with Georgia heat, the kind that clings to your skin and makes your neck damp before 10 a.m. Even the cicadas sounded tired. I wore jeans, a black t-shirt, and my old church sandals. No makeup, no earrings, just paperwork and quiet rage. The kind of rage that doesn't shout, the kind that sits still in your chest, heavy and deliberate. When I stepped out of my car, the courthouse square was nearly empty. The flag in front of the sheriff's office flapped lazily in the breeze, and somewhere a lawnmower buzzed across the street. I stood there for a moment, looking at the faded white letters on the glass door, Bibb County Sheriff's Department, and let the moment sink in. I didn't come to beg, didn't come to cry. I came to document. Inside, the air conditioning hit me like a wall. It smelled faintly of coffee, bleach, and paperwork that had seen too many summers. A ceiling fan creaked above, its slow rhythm matching my heartbeat. Deputy Mays sat behind the counter, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up. He'd known me for years, from the clerk's office, back when my days were full of file stamps, signatures, and polite smiles. Now even he looked unsure what to say. He pushed a styrofoam cup toward me. "Coffee's weak," he said, "but it's something." I took it, more out of courtesy than thirst. It tasted like burnt water, but I held it anyway. Something to do with my hands. He studied my face. "You sure you want to go down this road, Ms. Whitaker?" I looked him dead in the eye. "I already did," I said softly. "I just didn't know it till the wheels came off." He didn't laugh, didn't even blink, just nodded and pulled out a form. "Statement of intent," he said, setting it on the counter between us. "Need your signature here, 2 witness lines." I handed him my folder, neatly labeled tabs color-coded with sticky notes, medical records, auto mechanic report, photos of the brake line, text messages, bank slips. He flipped through it, one brow raised. When he got to the photos, his hand froze. "Where'd you get this?" he asked quietly. I tilted my head. "Does it matter?" He looked at me for a long second, then nodded once. "No, ma'am, it don't." I wasn't naive. I'd worked in the system long enough to know how slow it turned, especially for women like me. A black woman's pain always had to pass through red tape before it counted as real. But I had something most women didn't: paper, dates, receipts, evidence they couldn't ignore or explain away. I filled out every line of that form, slow and steady, the pen warm between my fingers. Signed it, twice, then slid it back across the counter like a final goodbye. When I walked out of that office, the sun hit me full in the face. My chest felt tight, not from fear, but from release. Every step toward the parking lot felt like reclaiming my name. Renetta met me at Hattie's Diner off Jefferson Street. The bell over the door jingled when I walked in, and the smell of fried catfish and cornbread made my stomach twist. We sat in the back booth, away from the windows, where the hum of conversation softened into white noise. The vinyl seat stuck to the back of my legs. I ordered sweet tea and a catfish plate. She just picked at a biscuit, her hands trembling slightly. "He's spiraling," she whispered. "Said you turned me against him. Said you trying to ruin his life." I stirred my tea, watched the lemon slice spin slow in the glass. "He tried to ruin mine first." Her eyes shimmered. I know, baby. I'm so sorry." I reached across the table and held her hand. Her skin was warm, her grip soft but steady. "You saved me," I said. She blinked back tears. "I wish I'd done it sooner." The jukebox in the corner changed songs. Al Green, "How Can You Mend a Broken Heart?" Fitting, I thought. That weekend, a certified letter came in the mail. Thick envelope, government seal, return address, Department of Revenue. I stood at the counter while I opened it, my hands steady, my stomach not. Inside was an audit notice. Apparently, Charles had filed joint tax returns for 2 years straight, without my signature. Used fake W-2s. Fake numbers. Fake everything. I should have been surprised, but I wasn't. Charles was many things, but careful wasn't one of them. I called Camille, my lawyer friend in Atlanta. She answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and controlled as always. "This is good," she said after I read her the letter. "It proves he forged documents. That's federal." "Good," I repeated, almost laughing. "Funny word for it." She sighed. "I know, honey, but every lie he told just became a receipt." Charles still hadn't called, but Jada did. Blocked number, Sunday night. I was sitting on the porch, watching the moths dance around the streetlight when my phone buzzed. Her voice was nervous, young. "Look," she said, "I don't want no trouble, but he's talking crazy. Said you turned his life upside down. Said you owe him your silence." I didn't speak, just listened. She hesitated. "He's driving to Florida tomorrow. Said he got folks down there. Said he done with Georgia women in their mouths." I hung up. Didn't say a word, just saved the number. Then I called Camille. "I think it's time," I said. "Time for what?" "To press charges." We filed everything on Monday morning. Fraud, forgery, attempted harm. Camille faxed it all to the county clerk, then followed up with a call. By noon, the sheriff had signed the protective order. Charles didn't know yet. He was already on the road. Probably thought he was driving toward freedom. Didn't realize he was driving straight into his own consequences. Tuesday morning, the knock came. Hard, angry, the kind of knock that carries ego in every hit. Renetta was the first to look through the blinds. Her voice broke. "Marcia, it's him." I stood up slow. My hands didn't shake. "I'll handle it," I said. When I opened the door, the sun hit his face, slick with sweat, jaw tight, eyes full of something between rage and desperation. He looked smaller somehow, even with all that noise in him. "You think you smart?" he hissed. "You think you're gonna take everything from me?" I stood still, didn't answer. He took a step forward. "You think you safe here?" That's when the door creaked open behind me. Renetta stepped out, phone in hand, camera already rolling. Her voice was steady. "Go on, Charles. Say that again." He froze, looked between us. The recording light blinked red. His jaw clenched. He spat on the porch. "You'll regret this," he muttered. Then he turned and walked away. The gravel crunched under his boots, each step louder than the last. We sent the footage to Camille that afternoon. She forwarded it to the sheriff. By nightfall, there was a warrant out for his arrest. Fraud, forgery, violation of trust. The law don't always move fast, but when it moves with evidence, it lands hard. The next day, I sat on Renetta's porch with a glass of iced tea, condensation dripping down the side. The world felt still again, a slow calm, still, like the air after a storm finally passes. In my lap was a notarized copy of the affidavit, official, sealed, my name printed clear. Renetta rocked beside me, quiet for a while before she spoke. "You ever think it'd come to this?" I shook my head. "No, I thought love meant never giving up." She nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Sometimes giving up is the bravest thing a woman can do." The street was quiet except for the hum of cicadas and the occasional bark of a dog. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of pink and gold. I took a deep breath. The air smelled like rain and freedom. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for the next sound, the next call, the next threat. I was just there. Not because the storm was over, but because I'd finally stopped sheltering the man who caused it. He was arrested at a Shell station just outside Valdosta, trying to gas up with a debit card registered in my name. The clerk said he looked nervous but polite, said something felt off. That's what the police report wrote. Customer behavior suspicious, attempted use of fraudulent card. What really felt off, though, wasn't the card. It was a man who could smile at the woman. He tried to kill, sit beside her at dinner like nothing happened, then run when the truth finally came knocking. They found 2 fake IDs in his wallet. One said Derek Watson. The other said Marvin Hill. Same face, same lies, different escape routes. He'd been planning to vanish. New name, new city, maybe even a new woman to destroy. But God don't let men like Charles Whitaker just disappear. Not when the woman he tried to bury is still standing, breathing, testifying, and holding every receipt he ever forged. Renetta was the one who told me. She called around 4:17 p.m., voice shaky but relieved. "They got him," she said. I gripped the phone tighter. "Where?" "South Georgia, Shell Station off I-75. He was trying to run." For a long time, I didn't say a word. Didn't cry, didn't cheer, just breathed. Finally, I whispered, "Good." Then I hung up and exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for years. That evening, I lit a candle in the living room, lavender and sage, the one Mama gave me on my 40th birthday. The match hissed when it caught, filling the room with soft light and calm smoke. I sat cross-legged on the couch, closed my eyes, and prayed. Not for vengeance, not for justice, just for peace, the kind that stays even when the noise fades. He called the next morning from county jail, blocked number, but I answered anyway. For a second, all I heard was static and the hum of a bad connection. Then his voice, low, smooth, syrup sweet. "Baby, I messed up," he said, "but we can fix this." I stayed quiet. Not one word. He took my silence as permission. "I was scared," he continued. "You left me, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't mean to hurt you, Marcia. I was just confused." Confused men don't crawl under cars with wrenches. Confused men don't cut brake lines. They don't forge signatures or file fake tax returns in your name. They make mistakes. He made choices. I finally spoke, slow and steady. "I'm not your safety net," I said. "I'm the storm you didn't expect." Then I hung up. The click felt cleaner than forgiveness ever could. The trial came slow, like all trials do in Georgia summers. Paperwork, continuances, lawyers talking circles. He pleaded not guilty. Of course he did. Men like Charles never think they're guilty, just misunderstood. His attorney, some overconfident boy in an expensive suit, tried to claim the breaks, failed naturally. Mechanical deterioration, he called it. But the mechanic I'd hired, a kind man named Darius Caldwell from Warner Robins, stood firm. He testified clear as day. "No, sir, this wasn't wear. This was tampering. Somebody cut that line clean. Fresh cut, no rust, no corrosion, no accident." You could hear the air leave the room. I sat through every minute of that trial. Front row, pearl earrings, pressed blouse, notebook in hand. Didn't fidget, didn't look. Away. Just watched. People glanced at me like they expected tears. But I didn't bring tears to court. I brought proof. And a calm too deep for them to understand. Renetta sat behind me every day, never left my side. When her turn to testify came, she walked to that stand like her feet were made of truth. Didn't cry. Didn't shake. Just told the story plain. "I saw my brother under her car," she said. "He said, let her feel scared for once. I thought he was just talking, but then she almost died." The courtroom went silent. Even the judge looked down. You could hear somebody sniffle in the back row. I stared at the table in front of me, hands folded, my pulse steady, because I didn't need the world to believe me anymore, and the evidence already had. It took 3 long days, but when the jury came back, I already knew. Guilty, on all counts. Fraudulent misrepresentation, attempted vehicular assault, identity theft. The judge's gavel cracked once. 6 years in state prison, eligible for parole in 3. He didn't look at me. Didn't even blink my direction. But when they cuffed him, his shoulders sagged. That same slump I'd seen the first time he ever got caught in a lie. It was the shape of defeat, and that was enough. When I stepped outside the courthouse, the sunlight hit my face like baptism. The air smelled like magnolia and exhaust, and the world felt wide again. Renetta met me on the steps, eyes red but smiling. "You did it," she whispered. I shook my head. "No," I said softly. "I survived it. There's a difference." The months that followed were quiet, heavy in places, light in others, the kind of quiet that lets you hear yourself again. I rented a little yellow house on Sycamore Street, 2 bedrooms, old brick fireplace, and kitchen walls the color of sunshine. The first night I moved in, I sat on the floor with a box of pizza and a bottle of sweet tea, watching the ceiling fan spin lazy circles. It wasn't peace yet, but it was mine. I planted tomatoes out back, set up wind chimes on the porch, and started walking every morning. 5 laps around the block while the cicadas sang and the world smelled like cut grass. Renetta came by every Sunday with pound cake and gossip. We'd braid each other's hair, talk about church folks, sometimes talk about him, sometimes not. One afternoon, she said quietly, "I don't know who raised him. We had the same mama, but he twisted somewhere." I squeezed her hand. "You're not responsible for his crooked," I said. She nodded, eyes wet, and I saw a bit of healing flicker behind them. That summer, I started writing again. Just small things at first. Grocery lists that turned into poems, journal entries that turned into prayers. One night, I wrote 5 words across a blank page and circled them twice. He doesn't get to win, not because of the verdict, not because of the prison sentence, but because I was still here, because I hadn't screamed or begged, hadn't set fire to his truck or slashed his tires like folks told me to. I'd gathered facts, spoken softly, and let truth burn through his lies like sunlight cutting morning fog. A few months later, a letter arrived from the Department of Revenue. The envelope was plain, but the weight of it felt like closure. They'd cleared my name, closed the audit, restored my tax record. Inside was a short note. "We commend your bravery and thorough documentation." Simple words, but they felt holy. I folded that letter and tucked it inside my Bible, right between Psalm 27 and Proverbs 31. Because a woman of wisdom ain't always loud. Sometimes she just moves in silence and wins. Last week, I saw Jada at the Dollar Tree on Vine Street. Her hair pulled back, eyes tired. She looked smaller somehow, worn down by her own mistakes. She saw me before I saw her. Paused in the cleaning aisle, holding a bottle of bleach like she'd forgotten what she came for. She nodded once. I nodded back. No words, no anger. That was enough. Now I work part-time at the public library downtown, help shelve books, run story time for the kids on Wednesdays, started teaching journaling workshops for women at the shelter. Women like me who've been through fire and came out quiet but unbroken. They listen close when I talk. Not because my story's loud, but because they can feel the weight behind every word. I never tell them all the details. Some wounds belong to the past, not the podium, but I always tell them this. You don't have to burn things down to get free. Sometimes you just open the window, let the smoke out, and walk away. It was almost spring when I got the letter, not from him. I'd already blocked his jail calls and tossed his scribbled postcards in the trash, unopened and unbothered. He'd written from county lockup before, little notes full of excuses dressed as apologies. I never read a word. This one was different. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, with my name written in looping cursive, deliberate, careful, almost trembling. Miss Gloria Whitaker, his mother. I stared at her name for a long time, thumb brushing across the ink. She'd never liked me. Not once. Always called me that woman instead of my name. Even after 16 years of marriage, even after I sat at her table for Thanksgiving, stirring gravy while she prayed long prayers about family unity. But now, her tone had changed. The letter smelled faintly of perfume, something powdery, old-fashioned, the kind of scent you only find in church pews and beauty shops. 3 pages folded neat, blue ink on white paper. She wrote about shame, about regret, said she raised him better, said she didn't know what he'd done, said if she had known, she would have called the law herself. I believed her. Maybe. But what caught me was the last paragraph. Her handwriting shifted there. letters smaller, more fragile. I always thought you were too quiet, Marcia, but maybe quiet was what this family needed all along. If you ever want to talk, my door's open. I sat with that letter for an hour. The house was silent except for the clock ticking on the wall. The world outside smelled like rain. I didn't cry, didn't tear it up, just folded it once more and slid it under my journal. Some things don't need an answer. Some peace don't come from going back. A few days later, I read it to Renetta. We were in her kitchen, shelling peas and listening to the whispers on the radio. The air was warm, heavy with butter and salt. She glanced up from the bowl and said, "Mama finally woke up." I shrugged. "She still don't know half of it." Renetta nodded, cracking another pod open. "She don't need to. You're alive, that's enough." And she was right. It was. By then, I'd started volunteering Saturdays at a nonprofit downtown called Women Rebuilding Women, a place for women who'd been through the kind of hell that changes your posture, makes you walk different, talk softer, but somehow stand taller. The office was small, chipped paint, old coffee pot, walls covered in sticky notes with prayers and phone numbers. I helped with intake forms, taught budgeting basics, and sometimes just sat and listened. That's where I met Erica, a woman about 30, 2 kids, same kind of fear I used to carry in my eyes. She sat across from me one morning, twisting a tissue in her hands. "He told me nobody would ever believe me," she whispered. "Said I was just overreacting." I leaned forward. "So did mine," I said, "but I didn't need the world to believe me. I just needed one person to listen, and that one person was me." She started to cry. Quiet, shaky sobs that came from somewhere deep. I let her, then handed her a tissue and said softly, "Now we start again." That spring, I finally got the letter I'd been waiting for. My official name change certificate. Back to Marcia Dean Whitaker. No hyphen, no shared identity. Just me. Standing on my own name like it was solid ground. A porch built with bricks that don't crumble. I framed it in a simple wood frame from Dollar General and set it beside an old photo of my mama holding me on the porch steps in 1979. Me wrapped in a towel, her hair tied in a scarf. Both of us smiling like the world hadn't taught us its cruelty yet. That name had weathered storms. It had survived. And now, so had I. One Sunday after church, I ran into Camille at the bakery on Main. She was standing by the glass counter ordering pecan tarts, her bright red lipstick perfect as always. "Marcia," she called, turning with a grin. "Girl, look at you. You got your glow back." I laughed. "Maybe it's just the sugar in the air." She hugged me tight, smelling like lilac. "And confidence." "I still use your case in my lectures," she said. "Hope you changed the names," I joked. "Of course, but I keep the power," she said, tapping her chest. "You turned silence into a sword." That line stayed with me, echoed in my head the rest of the day. I started writing again that month, not just journaling, real writing, essays, reflections, letters to myself from the future. One piece I titled, "The Day I Didn't Die." It began like this. "He cut my brakes, but not my spirit. He tried to end me, but didn't know I'd already begun." I submitted it anonymously to a small local zine that ran women's stories. Didn't expect anything. 2 weeks later, it appeared in print. They called it Haunting and Holy. I didn't correct them. 3 weeks after that, a young woman walked into the nonprofit. Skinny, nervous, held that same zine in her trembling hands like it was a map out of her own storm. "I don't know who wrote this," she said, voice breaking, "but it sounds like me." I looked at her, all bones and bravery, and smiled. "I think it was written for you." She started crying and I pulled her into a hug. It was the kind of moment that makes time slow down. The kind where healing feels like an echo passed from one heart to another. By summer, word had spread. Women started coming from all over the county, some from neighboring towns, asking if I could just sit and talk. So I started hosting small group circles on the last Thursday of every month at the old community center. We called it Marcia's Quiet Corner. Nothing fancy, just folding chairs, styrofoam cups of lemonade, and a stack of tissues in the middle of the table. We didn't vent. We processed. We shared facts, not just feelings. Talked about safety plans, credit repair, custody rights, real things. And in every voice, I heard a piece of my own story coming back home. Renetta came to every meeting, never said much, just sat in the back and smiled. Always brought something sweet, peach cobbler, lemon pound cake, sometimes her famous sweet potato cookies. She said, "This your ministry, whether you like it or not?" I said, "I'm not a preacher." She said, "You survived. That's close enough." One evening after group, I was locking up the center. The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the parking lot. As I turned the key, headlights flashed across the wall. A car pulling in slow. My breath caught. Old instinct. Dark windows. Georgia tags. For a second, my heart thudded hard against my ribs, but then the window rolled down. A young girl waved. Just a mama picking up her auntie. Nothing to fear. Still, I sat in my car for 10 minutes before driving off. Hands steady on the wheel, but my chest tight. Just breathing. Just letting the past know, you don't own me no more. That summer, I wrote one last letter. Short. Clear. To the Georgia Parole Board. It wasn't emotional. It was factual. Organized like a report. Because I'd learned that paper speaks louder than pain. I attached copies of the restraining order, the police report, and a letter from Camille outlining the ongoing risk. At the bottom, in black ink, I wrote, "This man did not just harm me physically. He attempted to erase me. I am asking, not for revenge, but for protection of the future I rebuilt from rubble." 2 months later, the reply came. Official seal. Plain language. Parole denied. No reconsideration for 18 months. I stood in my kitchen reading those words, sunlight pouring through the blinds, dust dancing in the air. I folded the letter, placed it beside the first one his mama had sent. Didn't smile, didn't cry, just whispered, "That's enough for now." That night, I sat on the porch, my porch, with a candle burning low and the wind chimes whispering in the soft spring breeze. The air smelled like honeysuckle and new beginnings. I looked up at the stars, wide, endless, forgiving, and said the words out loud. I forgive him. Not because he deserved it, not because it made me weak, but because I refused to let the weight of his choices bend my spine any longer. I forgave him because I earned that right. The leaves had started turning when Camille called again. Late afternoon, the kind of golden light that makes the world look softer than it really is. I was on my porch swing, second cushion from the left, blanket draped across my lap, steam rising from a mug of hot cider. The wind rustled through the trees, scattering a few crisp leaves onto the porch steps. My phone buzzed on the little side table. Camille. Her tone was calm, but it carried weight. "Marcia, you need to sit down." I almost laughed. "I'm already sitting." A pause. Then her lawyer's voice softened. "They're reviewing his case again. Not parole, something new. His attorney filed a motion claiming mental instability during sentencing." The world went still. Even the wind seemed to stop moving. I didn't say a word, didn't blink. Just let the silence sit between us like another person on that swing. The wood creaked beneath me as I finally exhaled. Camille sighed. "I don't think it'll go anywhere," she said. "But I thought you should know before you read about it." "Thank you," I said. My voice sounded far away, steady but cold around the edges. When we hung up, I stayed there, watching the light fade through the trees, letting the breeze wrap around my shoulders like my grandmother's old quilt used to. It's a strange thing, the way the body remembers. You can feel safe for months, breathe easy, even laugh again. Then one voicemail, one letter, one name flashing across your phone, and suddenly your pulse doesn't belong to you anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. The air felt too close, the walls too thin. I walked barefoot down the hallway of my little house, trailing my fingertips along the walls like reading Braille. Every creak in the floorboard felt like a whisper from an old version of myself. I kept repeating the same line under my breath, over and over like a prayer. He doesn't get to unwrite what he did. Outside, the wind howled low against the windows. Inside, I kept walking, not pacing, just moving, reminding myself that I still occupied this space, this life, this peace. 2 days later, an envelope came. Official seal, thick paper. A summons, not to testify, but to submit a victim impact update. Camille met me at the diner to help me write it. We ordered coffee and biscuits and worked in silence for a while. She said, "You don't owe them emotion, you owe them truth." So I wrote, in my own words, "Every morning I breathe without fear is a victory he didn't earn. Every step I take toward peace is a step away from the cliff he tried to push me off. My safety, my sanity, and my silence are sacred, and I will not allow them to be disrupted." We sealed it in an envelope and sent it certified mail, a blessing wrapped in law. When the postal clerk stamped it, the sound echoed like a gavel. That Sunday, I went to church wearing all white. Not for symbolism, just because I liked how the linen felt against my skin. Light, clean, untouchable. The air inside was thick with perfume and prayer. The ushers fanned people with bulletins while the choir hummed softly under their breath. Pastor Dixon preached from Psalm 34. "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." I didn't cry, didn't shout. But when the choir began, "I don't feel no ways tired," I closed my eyes and let the music fill me. Because I wasn't tired, not anymore. I was transformed, polished by pressure, refined by survival. Renetta came by after service. We sat on the porch, same as always, sipping her homemade lemonade. She looked out across the street, eyes narrowed. "You think they'll let him out?" I didn't answer right away. The cicadas sang somewhere in the distance. Finally, I said, "If they do, it won't change what I rebuilt. It won't bring him back into power. That door is closed, welded shut." She nodded slowly. "You know Mama wants to see you." I raised an eyebrow. "Gloria?" Renetta nodded. "She's been asking about you, wants to talk face to face, says she got something she needs to say." I looked at the children across the street riding bikes barefoot, their laughter echoing against the pavement. "You think she changed?" Renetta took a sip of lemonade. "I think she sees you now." A week later, I agreed to meet her. We chose a small diner halfway between Macon and Warner Robins. Neutral ground, public place, plenty of exits. When I walked in, the bell over the door jingled, and the smell of fried okra and coffee hit me like a wave of memory. She was already there, sitting in a corner booth, back straight, a small Bible folded open beside her plate. Her silver hair was neatly pinned up, her lipstick faint but precise. She stood when she saw me. I nodded. We sat. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the ceiling fan filled the silence, blending with the clink of dishes and the sizzle from the kitchen. Finally, she cleared her throat. "I read the court records," she said. "Didn't believe it at first. Thought maybe you exaggerated. But then I saw the photos, heard Renetta's testimony." Her voice cracked slightly. I stayed quiet. She looked down at her Bible, thumb tracing the page. "I failed you," she said finally. "I failed him too. But mostly, I failed you." Those words hit harder than I expected. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper, edges worn. "I wrote this the night he was arrested. Never sent it, couldn't. But maybe it belongs to you now." I stared at the letter resting between us. Didn't take it right away. Didn't trust my hands not to shake. All I said was, "I never wanted anything but peace." She nodded, eyes glistening. "I know," she whispered, "and I pray you have it now." I left the letter unopened on my nightstand for 3 days. Every time I passed it, the candle beside it flickered like it was reminding me it was there. When I finally read it, the house was quiet. Just the sound of the wind through the trees and the low hum of the refrigerator. Her handwriting was neat but trembling, blue ink fading at the edges. She wrote about denial, about guilt, said she didn't understand what I went through until she saw her own son's fingerprints on destruction. She apologized for defending a man she didn't really know, and at the very end she wrote, "I don't expect forgiveness, but I do hope someday you'll let your story live without a shadow." That line stayed with me, still does. By Thanksgiving, I decided to host a dinner, a small one. I invited a few women from the support circle, some who had no family, some who couldn't face the ones who didn't believe them. I opened my home, set extra plates, made 2 sweet potato pies and a pot of greens that filled the house with warmth. Played Frankie Beverly and Mays low on the stereo. The table was mismatched, folding chairs, thrifted dishes, but it was full of laughter, full of quiet gratitude. We went around and shared what we were thankful for. When it came to me, I looked at each woman, then said softly, "I'm thankful I lived long enough to become my own protector." The room went still. Then someone whispered, "Amen." It sounded like a prayer set free. A few days later, Camille called again. Her voice was bright this time. "They rejected the motion," she said. "It's over." I didn't smile right. Away. Just closed my eyes and breathed. "Thank you," I whispered. "You okay?" she asked. I looked around my little house. The framed photo of Mama, the candle flickering by the window, the stack of journals on my desk. "I am now," I said. A week later, I drove back to the courthouse. Not for any case, just to sit. The same marble floors, the same hum of conversation, but everything felt different. I sat on that same bench where I'd once waited, heart pounding, hands shaking. This time, I was calm. Still. The sound of heels clicking on tile, the soft shuffle of papers, even the low chatter of attorneys. It all blended into a strange kind of peace. The courthouse no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like punctuation, the end of a long, hard sentence. Back home, I sat on my porch swing with a mug of cider and a blank page in my journal. The sky was turning orange, the kind of sunset that makes you forget how heavy the day's been. I started to write. Healing doesn't come all at once. It comes in glances, in pauses, in the moment you realize you don't flinch when someone says his name. I closed the journal and leaned back. The wind chimes sang a soft tune above me. Fireflies blinked along the edge of the yard. And for the first time in years, I looked up at the stars. Bright, steady, infinite. Maybe they'd always been that way? Or maybe I was just no longer dimmed by the weight of pretending everything was fine. The sun rose different that morning, not because the light was brighter or the sky more blue, but because for the first time in a long while, I didn't dread the day ahead. That's how I measure my healing now. Not by how loud I laugh, but by how little I flinch when silence shows up. I brewed my coffee slow, steady, letting the drip and hiss of the old machine fill the quiet like background music. Opened the windows wide, let the air in. It smelled like jasmine and damp pine from the rain overnight. A soft Georgia morning, the kind my mama used to call God's way of saying, try again. I stood barefoot on the cool tile, watching the sunlight spill across my kitchen floor like honey. That day marked 1 full year since the verdict. 12 months, 365 days, and not one trace of him. No letters from jail, no calls. No somebody said they saw him rumors at the grocery store. Just nothing. That's when I knew I had really let go. When I realized I no longer checked the rearview mirror for ghosts. Renetta came by mid-morning, arms full of fresh biscuits wrapped in a dish towel. The smell of butter and honey hit me before she even crossed the porch. She hugged me, tight, longer than usual, and whispered, "You okay today?" I smiled. Better than okay. We sat at the kitchen table, sunlight pouring through the window, gospel humming low from my Bluetooth speaker. The golden light stretched across the counter like a soft ribbon, touching everything that once felt broken. We didn't talk much, didn't have to. Peace doesn't need company. It just needs witness. I had a peace now I didn't have to earn daily, a peace that just was. Later that afternoon, I drove downtown to the Women Rebuilding Women's Center, our little nonprofit that somehow kept growing faster than any of us expected. Today was special. 2 of our girls, Tanya and Marlene, were graduating from the program. Marlene, baby-faced, shy, always chewing her nails when she spoke, had finally earned her GED after walking away from a man who used to tell her she was nothing. And Tanya, strong as steel, with that big laugh you could hear down the hall, had opened her own hair-braiding studio. We clapped and cried. They brought cupcakes with thick white frosting, the kind that sticks to your fingers. Someone wrote, "I am enough," across the whiteboard in glitter pens. When the music died down, Marlene hugged me tight. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was clear. "I only stayed because you showed me what surviving looked like," she whispered. I smiled and squeezed her hand. "No, baby," I said. "You stayed because you remembered who you were. I just reminded you." That moment felt like a full circle prayer, like a seed I didn't know I'd planted, finally pushing through the soil. That night, back home, I opened the last drawer in my bedroom, the one I hadn't touched in a year. Inside were the remnants of a life I'd already outgrown. A pair of cufflinks I bought him for our 10th anniversary. The old prepaid phone I never threw away. An envelope stuffed with printed court papers. Every document I once told myself I'd keep just in case. I sat on the floor, cross-legged, barefoot, held each item in my hands, let the memories wash over me, not to wound me, but to remind me how far I'd come. Then slowly I packed them away in a fireproof box, not out of fear, out of finality. I wasn't guarding evidence anymore. I was closing a chapter. I locked the box, slid it under the bed, and whispered, "You don't own me anymore." The next morning I woke up to a knock at the door. It was Calvin, the young mailman who always hummed Luther Vandross songs when he made his rounds. He grinned, handed me a small brown package. No return address. I thanked him, set it on the counter, and poured myself a cup of coffee before opening it. Inside was a single key. Silver. Old. Worn smooth at the edges, wrapped in tissue paper, and a note, written in careful handwriting. It belonged to your grandmother's house. I found it cleaning out Mama's things. Thought it should go back where it belonged. R. Renetta. I held that key in my hand for a long time, felt the weight of it, not heavy, but real. It was the key to the land in Twiggs County, the same land Charles once told me to sell, called it just dirt. But that land wasn't just dirt. It was roots, it was blood, it was legacy. And now, it was mine again. A month later, I took a drive down there. The highway stretched long and quiet, lined with wild grass and pine. When I pulled off onto the old dirt road, the air changed, thicker, sweeter, full of memory. The house was gone, collapsed years ago, but the land still breathed. Tall oaks stood guard around the edges, leaves whispering like old women gossiping about blessings. Wildflowers pushed through the cracked red earth. The air smelled of soil and sun. I stepped out of the car, stood in the middle of that field, and closed my eyes. Felt the sun on my skin, felt my heartbeat slow, and I heard it. My mama's voice, clear as if she were standing right behind me. Don't let no man bury you in a life that don't fit. Grow where you were planted. And if the soil's poisoned, move. I smiled, because that's exactly what I did. I moved, and now I grow. The idea for the retreat came to me right there, in that field, a place for women like me, women who needed stillness, women who needed proof that peace could be built from rubble. I'd call it Stillhouse. Small cabins, a garden, a porch big enough for 20 rocking chairs, and no judgment, no sermons, no speeches, just space. A sanctuary for the ones who survived, for the ones who stayed too long, and for the ones who left just in time. At our next circle meeting, I brought sketches. We sat in a circle of folding chairs, cups of lemonade sweating in our hands. I explained the dream, what it could be, who it could help. The room fell quiet. Then Cheryl, a woman who rarely spoke, said softly, "You're turning pain into shelter." I nodded. Isn't that what we're all trying to do? Someone started clapping, then another. And before I knew it, the room was alive with applause, not loud or dramatic, but proud, the kind of clapping that feels like a heartbeat you didn't know you shared. Now, I don't measure my life by how far I've come from Charles. I measure it by how far I've walked toward myself. Every morning, I write something kind in my journal. One sentence, one truth, one promise. Something like, "Peace is mine and I keep it like breath." On Sundays, I host what we call quiet mornings. No talking, no music, just presence. We sit in silence on my porch, sip tea, and let the wind do the preaching. Sometimes I sing, low, off-key, but from the heart. Songs my mama used to hum while folding laundry or shelling peas. Songs that remind me freedom doesn't always need a soundtrack. Sometimes it's just the sound of your own steady breathing. Every day now I touch that key. It sits on my dresser, shining in the morning light. The key to nothing yet, but everything ahead. I don't know if he'll ever write again. Don't care if he does. His story ended the day the judge said guilty. Mine kept going, and it keeps going. With or without apologies, with or without understanding, with or without closure. Because I am my own closure now, my own proof, my own beginning, and that's enough. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.